On Milwaukee. How are you doing? Welcome to FoodCrush, the On Milwaukee podcast for people who eat, or in this case, the video for people who eat. Thank you all for watching and joining us today. And I am your host, as always, Matt Mueller, culture editor at On Milwaukee. But obviously, the star of the show is my co-host, Lori Fredrich of OnMilwaukee.com. How you doing, Lori?
I'm doing well, but oh no, I'm not the star because it is our guests who are always the star.
Okay, Lori. Okay,
so yeah, so I'm great, and I hope we're all great. And we are here today with, I don't know, a very special person, a friend of mine, or someone who has grown to be a friend of mine, but also an entrepreneur in the city who does great things. I'm here with Emerald Mills, who is the founder and owner and everything about diverse dining. And she's here to tell us all about that, talk about lots of different things, lots of cool topics. Hi, Emerald.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm doing really well. Whenever technology is working, it's a good day.
Yes, totally agreed. So you're working from home these days?
Yeah, I'm probably about 33%, a little bit. I mean, I try to go outside as much as possible, and the restaurants that are open, and the places that are open, of course, with my mask, I try to be there. I also have a little bit of a partnership with Upstart Kitchen, so I go there quite a bit because their doors are open with the new entrepreneurs that are coming out of there. So.
Oh, that's awesome. What are you doing with Upstart?
Just figuring out ways to help support the new entrepreneurs that are starting. So supporting with different events like I do. Also just doing some brainstorming with Pat and figuring out some other ways that we can, join our missions and support the new food entrepreneurs that are coming out of that space.
Yeah, that's awesome. So maybe we should back up a little bit, because for people who aren't familiar with you and diverse dining, I don't know, maybe you can tell us the story of how diverse dining came to be and what it is meant to be in terms of your mission and goals.
Yes, so I'll give a little brief summary about diverse dining and how I got started. I have a background and have had a background in public health for the last almost 20 years. So I worked at the City of Milwaukee Health Department for about 8 years. I worked for various other organizations, hospital, and even some smaller nonprofits over the last 20 years. And I felt like, I felt like race, but I also felt like you can almost put any issue in there where people were divided, started to become like the elephant in the room, primarily race, when I was working. And I felt like people recognized that the elephant about race was there and that it was something that they probably should address. Like eventually he might make some noise or he might use the bathroom, and like it was going to be a mess. But I felt like in a lot of cases it was being ignored in the sense of really having an opportunity for people to be able to talk through the different things that kept us divided and separated as a city. And so I, about 2 years ago, really exactly, decided to start Diverse Dining, which was a platform and a space, a place to create, to have a safe space to create conversations and to really build relationship across culture and across any divide. I decided that food would be a good strategy to do that because one, every time I saw pockets of diversity throughout the city, it seemed like it was always at a restaurant or always at a place where people were eating or some food was involved. And then two, I just knew from, being a communication major, studying Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that, food is a natural relaxer for people to be able to put down some of the defenses and barriers. And I guess personally, I could just say if I'm hungry, you can forget just about anything. So I utilize the food, bringing people together over conversations, my experience in facilitation to start crafting these conversations around various different topics to bring people together.
Well, and one of the key things that I remember you emphasizing is that it's not just about having a conversation with a stranger. I mean, like, that's a first step. What's the advantage of actually sitting down with people and then kind of committing to having a relationship with those people that's ongoing?
Yeah, and that is an ongoing part of the development. But I mean, my goal for sure for diverse dining was the relationship piece. I feel like, and like you said, people are having conversations all day long. But if your defenses are high, if you've been having the same conversation with the same people and nothing is changing, none of those things are really going to help. And so my focus and what I feel like is unique about my organization is that it is designed to build relationships. So we have a very, strategic approach in like relaxing and calming and getting people to connect before we have conversations that, could challenge people, because the goal is for people to build relationships long term and over time, because I believe that real change is the key. I mean, real relationships is the key to real change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it becomes much harder to make assumptions about people when you know them, right? I mean, like I could see you across the room and make 24 different assumptions about who you are based on, your hair or the clothes you're wearing or the color of your skin. But once I meet you, and get to know you a little bit, it becomes harder. Like, I can't make assumptions anymore. I actually know you.
A million assumptions you can make. Yeah.
Yeah. So relationships are huge, and having conversations in general. And you were saying, like, people don't have the opportunity to talk with people who are different from themselves very often. Is that because it's hard? Like, we don't put ourselves in situations, we stay comfortable? Or is it really that we don't, like, that our world is constructed so that we don't have to do that?
Yeah, I have a lot of speculations. I mean, I think for the city of Milwaukee specifically, just, based on, research and fact, we have been structurally designed to be in separate places. I mean, I think we're on a very late show with even passing the act where African American people could live in the suburbs and things like that. And so I think that proximity wise in this city, it is very, we're very segregated, the most segregated in the United States. And so location wise, people, I think, just kind of stick to, what they're familiar to or where they have been taught and, feel like they can live and be. And so I felt like it was particularly hard here, which was difficult for me in particular. But I feel like that was the biggest issue behind it all, is that people, were pretty safe in their own spaces and kind of stuck to them unless they were venturing out for a really specific reason.
Mm-hmm.
With the first meals and the first experiences, how did you notice people reacting? And have you noticed people getting more comfortable over time with them, or what were those first kind of dinners like?
Well, being a facilitator, like I said, my background's in public health, and I did a lot of training and facilitating, for a number of years. But I really wanted, because of the nature of the conversation, wanted to spend my first couple of conversations observing. And really, kind of taking a back seat to sit and see what people did naturally on their own, if it was a diverse group of people and they were in a space. And so my first meeting, I didn't interject much, or I didn't, really, try to lead the conversation. I wanted to see what people would do. And people, connected pretty well. I did see that people needed guidance. The conversation definitely went on. Trump came up and corporations came up, and when certain things like that come up, we're back to putting up walls again. And so it helped me to realize that I would need to guide that conversation a little bit more. But we do still spend, 2 years later, about an hour of our 2.5 hours together is really time where people can talk to each other. And I just have questions. We also have ground rules that make sure people know that they have to keep the conversation specifically around their experience. So they can't say, in this neighborhood, this is always happening. But they can say, I went over to this neighborhood and this was my experience. And so it helps to keep the conversation centered around people's individual experiences and stories versus speculations and whatever else they heard and things like that. So it's a guided conversation, but the best part, I always say, of the diverse dining experience, as it is the time when people get to talk about and share their story with each other and talk about different issues and how they've experienced them.
Yeah. Well, and part of that kind of introductory period is creating a safe place, or a place that feels safe. And I'm just curious about why so many places feel unsafe to us to have conversations. I mean, us being a really general term, like I think about it every now and again, and I'm just like, why do we feel like we can't talk to one another about certain topics? And growing up, it was always like, oh, don't talk about religion, don't talk about politics. And growing up, I always wondered, I'm like, but if we don't talk about any of this ever, like it just sits there and we seethe, or we get passive aggressive at this point, like on Facebook, and the same goes, I think, for conversations about race and, economic divisions and any number of those things. Why? I mean, you probably don't have an answer to this, but
I have lots of speculations. And in my own experience. I mean, my own experience is, I'll say, because it happens often, and we know, when we talk about, or we want to talk about race. I mean, I think, and I used the analogy about the elephant in the room, and I was talking to someone on the phone the other day, and I talked about how, the elephant that's been in the room for years is now making a lot of noise. And so people are having to decide if they're going to run from the elephant, if they are going to feed the elephant, if they are going to, because you can't ignore the elephant anymore. And I think that is a lot of what, kind of what you were alluding to, African-American people, particularly, I would say, in this country, but definitely even, if you take it to the city or to the corporations they work in, or maybe even to the neighborhoods that they live in, have not felt like they've had a voice, or that they have been being seen, or that they've been being heard. And so for very similar reasons, I mean, I think anybody can identify to having a time when they weren't seen or heard. But I think for African American people in this country, it is like all the time, right? And so, I think that as far as why we can't talk about certain things, I think it comes to, some of it is historical. It comes to just like what we've been taught, and the way history has been hidden, information about certain things have been hidden, conversations are shut down. And then in our own families, like you said, if sometimes we're raised, don't talk about this, don't talk about money, don't talk about relationships, don't talk about, men, don't be vulnerable. I mean, it's all of these do and don't rules that we, have learned to follow, but then we have all of this life and all of these experiences that are going on with us that eventually, some of that stuff starts to come up. So, so I think that's just what's happening now. I feel like I said the elephant in the room is roaring, or, the bump has come to a head, however you want to think about it. It's a lot of energy that we've been suppressing for so much time. And now, now we can't suppress it anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I've seen that largely as a good thing, because it has definitely brought to the fore, a lot of times it's really easy, even though the elephant is big, sitting off in the corner, it is so easy to ignore it and to pretend like it's not there, especially since, like, if you're scared of elephants, you have a trepidation, but you don't have to confront your fear. You don't have to make yourself uncomfortable. You just ignore it, because it's like, it's tied up in the corner, not doing anything, right? And so, I don't know, for me personally, I mean, it's definitely created some interesting in conversations, and some of them ad hoc, in not necessarily comfortable, places. But it's been good, because in my mind, the first step is we got to talk about this, and we got to do something about this. But we can't figure out what to do unless we talk, which I think it's back to kind of, diverse dining. Like if you don't know people who are different from you, if you can't have conversations with them, there is no way that you have any idea about their lived experiences. There's no way that you can, have like a healthy human interaction with people around you. So
absolutely, I think that's the start. There's nothing that I don't think that we can, no human being or no even thing that we can identify with and not get to know it or not read the instructions or not get the information and be able to use it properly. And I think that when we don't know someone, then abuse is inevitable. Kind of the same way they say, if like you don't know the purpose of something, abuse is inevitable. It's the same thing with our relationships. If I don't know, someone of a certain race, I'm probably going to harm them and I'm probably going to abuse them because I'm not familiar with anything. I don't know their language. I don't know their culture. I don't know their experience. And so I'm going to misuse it,
I think we also all have this fear of making mistakes, when we talk about things or when we talk to each other. I guess to some extent that feels like a legitimate thing, and in other ways it doesn't to me, because we don't worry about those things when we're around people we know, making mistakes. I mean, how do we get comfortable with, because we're all going to make mistakes, right?
Yeah, I feel, and I recently wrote a book about rejection, and I think that for me, like the issue for me is it's bigger than race. I think right now race is what we're talking about in this country right now, but I think even the bigger issue is being accepted. I think everybody has a need ultimately of being accepted, and I think that when you talk about first of all, I'm fortunate enough to have very diverse friends, like many, friends of different backgrounds. And I've cultivated that over time. And so I think that when just period, when you think about, when you think about when I think about the different relationships, it's just important to understand, understand what all is there, like what the dimensions of those different people are and the individuals are, and how unique, like everybody's perspective at the end of the day comes back to them wanting to be accepted and not wanting to be rejected. I think that, some of that could be in their family, like I think about people, and a lot of times I've thought about Martin Luther King time. When I was growing up, for my parents, that was like when they were alive. They were just like we'll talk to our kids about what's happening with the protests. But my mother very intimately understood what was happening with Martin Luther King. Well, by the time I was growing up, a lot of those things, at least knowledge-wise, I wasn't faced with. I could go to school where I wanted, I thought. I had certain experiences as a young person that I didn't feel like were affected by it. But, all of those incidents, all of those things that happened just happened. They were happening with my parents, And so to think that just because a law changes, that hearts change, or just that because of a law changing, that the way people have experienced life up until that point changes, is not a real thing. And so, laws change and people in some ways conform, but now what we're seeing now is a lot of people didn't conform. They maybe just, didn't display things in the same way. And so I think that it's important, it's just so important for us to deal with the heart issues and to deal with the fact that, like, I don't want to be, if my mother, hated white people, and I grew up because of what happened, and then there's a group of people who grew up and their parents hated black people, like, to think that, I'm not going to want to be rejected by my mom, so I'm going to have to pick a side. Either I'm going to be okay with what my mom is doing, or I'm going to, maybe be rejected by my mother and choose a different way that I don't even know if I'll be accepted in that group. And so I think that at the end of the day, and I even honestly, I say a lot with the protests now, you got a lot of people standing out there, and sometimes in my opinion, I'm thinking, how are you at your job? How are you with your family? Like, I appreciate you being at the protest, but do you protest when you are in the midst of injustice in your own space? Because that is really where, really where it's going to matter over time. Not that what's happening now doesn't matter, or it's not important, but it's like, you're going to need you to stand up when you're sitting down at the table for dinner. We're going to need you to stand up when you're going to work next week, and some microaggression happens at work. So I think that's important to think about as well.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I heard, and one of the things that I think Alma commented, the comment was on the bottom of the screen for just a slight minute, was that we need to admit our biases, like where we came from, and kind of, I always call it like unpack that, and be upfront about it, because we can't be honest and enter into conversations if we're not admitting, like, okay, I'm a white lady. Yeah. I don't know, like, here's how I was raised. Here's what I come with.
Alma is still in my tips for later on at the end. She is, she is right. I mean, that's it. Be honest. You have to be honest. And I think that, it's not like we don't know that isn't something that everybody in this country in some way, shape, or form experienced it. Whether you were 100% ignorant to it, whether you were, on the side of the victim, or whether you were on the side of the aggressor, in your lineage or in your relationships, you experienced it in some way, and we continue to experience it, based on the things that we see. And so I think being honest is not to move all the way to tips, because I know we got other stuff to talk about, but I think being honest is one of the best ways to have conversation, whether it's with somebody you totally don't know. Like if you say, hey, I know, hey, I made some mistakes. I mean, I see a lot of captions of the signs that say, I get it now. And people are like, putting that on Facebook. Like, that's great, because we don't necessarily, we don't care when you get it. We just want you to, at some point, people want you to at some point get it, and to own that and to acknowledge that is major.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the other things you said and that I feel somewhat, it hits me close to home, is this idea that it is easy for me to go and stand with others, and like even for public protests, for all of that. It is so much harder to deal with family members and people that I've been close to for a long time who do not feel the same way I do. And for years, like, I've gone through stages. I mean, growing up, I think you either stay in the straight and narrow and believe what you were raised to believe. And I use the example of like religion, which I've departed a bit. I mean, my perspectives are different from what they were when I was growing up. And that's caused a little bit of issue. I was like, I didn't raise you to believe that. I was like, yeah, my life experience has taught me, and this is what I believe now. And the conversations, especially regarding race, like in my family, like those are still really difficult. And they're probably the most difficult people to deal with, because I think that people need to be open to it, and people need to acknowledge that our perspectives may have changed due to life experience. But you're saying that those are really, really important, and explain a little bit why. Like, I mean, I know why for me. Like, I would like to be able to think that I can use the relationships that I have family to help people to better understand what they should be doing, and that it's kind of my responsibility to try to do that. There's no guarantees.
Well, I'll explain. So one of the things I'll say is, one, I think that, and even I can even hear Lori a little bit of just like, I don't want to say the fear, but the just the not wanting to sit with, even trying to have that conversation with family. And don't get me wrong, there are some people in my family that, I totally understand that, and it totally makes sense. However, I say what I'm saying, one, because one of the things about me, and I know we asked this question already, but one of the things that has guided my journey is that I have a sister who I love, and I'll talk to her after this call. But because I'm busting her out. But like she chose very different paths. I mean, my family, she chose very different paths than me, you know, where I was in life. Like I was you know, I'm a Christian. I had, you know, started to learn about, and I didn't grow up Christian, but I got into church at like 19. And so I started to, like, you know, how you do when you learn something new, you dive into the Bible and, you know, what is it saying and who should you talk to, who should you not, what should you do, you know, trying to get all the information for my own knowledge. And at the same time, I had a sister who was, you know, not Christian at all, and very much, you know, probably some of the things that you read in the Bible is like, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And I remember, you know, matter of fact, at the time that I was, you know, really getting deep in my Christianity, she was getting really deep in being a Muslim. Okay. And so I remember, you know, that her going through that. And I remember right away, you know, like there was a lot of things that were challenging for me. But at the end of the day, I remember consciously saying to myself a lot of times, this is my sister and I love her. And we're just going to have to figure it out. You know what I mean? Like so what that situation became for me was, what values do I hold on to that are important to me, for me to keep? What things for me are, you know, like they're my preference, but they're not really gonna, you know, cause me to do anything that I don't want to do. And then, you know, at the end of the day, what's most important, which is, that's my sister. I love her. She can turn into, you know, whatever she want to turn into. She can become a magician. She's still gonna be my sister. You know what I'm saying? And so we had to figure that thing out. And, you know, outside of her being a Muslim, like she everything radical that you could do, my sister did it, and she lived it unapologetically and unashamed. And really, for me, what that did was ultimately gave me some courage to stand up in what I believed in, because one, she accepted me back, but also, you know, I'm like, and this is another thing that's helped me throughout my journey with diverse dining. It's like, people be raising all kind of hell just as bold as they want to be, and like, who am I, or why do I not think that I have the right to be who I am because of somebody else doesn't think that it's okay? And so for me, I had to, like I said, figure out what values, you know, what are non-negotiables. Like, okay, you're Muslim. I'm not fasting from 6 to 8. You know, like, I'm hungry, I'm gonna eat or whatever. So when she's doing that, we'll figure out we'll meet in the evening. If she's doing Ramadan in the morning, I'll hang out with her in the evening. You know, what is not negotiable for me? I'm not praying with you or whatever else. At the end of the day, you're still my sister, and I can still figure out a way to live with you. And if we value each other enough and respect each other enough, we can still figure out how to have communication and how to be respectful without, you know, breaking and ending our relationship. And so that I mean, again, my sister probably in and of herself was probably the first person to help me figure out that I'm going to have to learn how to love people. And then I also took a personal interest in what she was doing to figure out, well, what is the same about what she believes and what's different about what she believes. I don't have to run from Muslims, you know what I'm saying, because I'm a Christian. If what I believe is what I believe, then, you know, I mean, what they believe is what they believe. I don't have to change them to be who I am.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. What if I'd love to know, in all of your time in doing diverse dining, what have been some of the most memorable conversations that you've kind of helped guide, or that you've kind of been a part of during this process? Whether they were the ones that got the most heated or the ones that got the most emotional, and you don't have to give close details if you don't want to reveal those here, but just what were some of the conversations that really were some of those moments that you were like, what we're doing here is working and good?
Well, you know, I'm not going to be extra, but I mean, I think all of our conversations, because people were engaged. I mean, people engage when they come, they talk. It's just like prerequisite. So we've had really, really great conversations all across the board. Some of my favorites, and some of the ones that I remember the most, one would be our conversation on vulnerability, because there were a lot of men that came, and to hear men talk about, well, you know, my wife wants me to be vulnerable, but, you know, then she really don't want me to be vulnerable, and like, you know, like, to really be able to share like their fears or their challenges with being vulnerable, and just hearing men talk really I think it's a gift. But to hear them talk about a subject as intimate as vulnerability, and why they're conflicted in some ways with being vulnerable because what society has put on them was one conversation I will always remember. We also did a conversation on Mother's Day, or not Mother's Day, but it was around mothers. And I created, what I call like a vulnerability table. And we kind of identified different aspects of mother or different things that have happened with people's mother. And so that conversation got really good to hear people, talk about the pain of losing their mother, or who expressed the pain of having a mother that they felt like they had to mother their whole life. Was a really good conversation. Our conversation at the Syrian restaurant on Mitchell Street was really good. We talked about the pursuit of happiness, and to hear what the refugees had to do to pursue not even just happiness, but life. And then to think about the things we've had to flee from and run away from to pursue our own happiness, and how it's built a certain level of resilience in us was another good conversation. But like I said, they're all good. And we also did a vulnerability conversation with a corporation, which I thought was really good. I also kind of brought back the vulnerability table, and to hear people talk about the different, so on the vulnerability table, I'll explain a little bit. I talked about a lot of different life incidents that people go through that, are common, but people don't think they're common. So like bankruptcy or divorce or losing a parent. And I put the things on the table. This is copywritten. No, I'm just kidding. But I put the things and I gave people badges, and so they walked around the table, and just put badges for how many things that they could identify with. So nobody knew what things they were picking, and what things they were picking or what they weren't picking. What particular incident they experienced. And then we had a discussion about it, and then we also had a discussion about how much better would you have felt if you could have shared that you were going through a loss of a parent while you were at work, or if you could have talked to somebody about what you were going through. And then we talked to those who did talk about it and how they were relieved. So that was a vulnerability, a really, really good conversation in a corporate setting that I felt like really bonded and brought people together.
Yeah.
So I could name all of them. I'll keep going. But like, I think that, all the conversations are pretty good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That the one involving men and vulnerability sounds really fascinating, because obviously we live in such a society that forces men into these boxes, and obviously that's not the greatest issue going on right now. But I think if
this society forces everybody into a box, yes. And that's why we have to all come out the box together. Like it's a box. Right. I mean, it's a box, and what happens is we get in these boxes, and then we box each other, and it's just really, it's bizarre to me. And again, that's part of my passion behind starting Diverse Dining and everything else. It's just that everything has a box. I laugh, and I think I've had this conversation with Lori before. And I'm not picking on vegans, but I'm like, whatever, we join a cause, and then we, instead of just focusing on the cause, we'll figure out how to talk about people who don't have the same cause as us. And so, like I laugh about people who, like some of my people, not some of my people, but some people that I know that are like vegan this month. And then like they're talking about all the people who eat meat. And it's like, okay, like just 2 months ago, you weren't eating meat. Now it's okay that you're vegan, but you don't have to like make everybody feel bad for not being vegan. And like, I think that that's what we, a lot of times in society do. It's like, it's black or white. It's yes or no. It's what I'm doing, or it's not what I'm doing. And I just don't think we have to do that to be who we are. I think that we can be who we are and let people be who they are, and let them, if they're admired by the strength that we have or by what we're doing, then we can show them that, and we can bring them along. And if they don't like it, then it's okay too. It's just it's so many boxes that they all get on my nerves. I mean, like everybody's in a box. It's just annoying.
And I do like that analogy, because I always and similarly, I always said, you live in your own bubble, and sometimes it's a bubble that somebody told you had to live in. And sometimes it's a bubble that you create, and we don't go outside of our bubbles, and we're so scared that if we touch the side of the bubble that it's going to pop. And then what happens? Like, what happens when, we don't have the identity of the box that we're in? I think some of these things get pretty deep, because society boxes us in, but sometimes those things they box us into become comfortable things, And in order to really reach out to other people who are in their other boxes, you have to like poke a hole in the box and put your finger out and like look out and see the sun. And then maybe you can stick your arm out and then maybe you can hold somebody's hand next to you. I don't know. It's like this coming outside of whatever shells we've been trapped in. So I like that as a metaphor as well, because it not only gets into how we've been labeled, but also the places where we end up being comfortable.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
we can be comfortable. We can get comfortable in discomfort pretty easily. Mm-hmm. We can get comfortable. I hear a lot of people talk about, after this pandemic, just how, like our new normal, our normal wasn't normal. We've got comfortable in so many, we got comfortable in so many different norms that just, it should never be normal for us. It should never be normal for us to, see somebody, murdered in the street and not, it should never be normal for us to, not know if, somebody else across town has food to eat or has toilet paper or whatever else. I mean, like, these are human things that it should always make a check mark in our spirit to say something is wrong with that. Is there something I can do to help? Is there somebody I know that can help? That should be a way of life for us. But in America and, pre-pandemic, it just, it became far too common for far too many of us, every day of our lives. And I think that, the discomfort even that we feel now is, as you said earlier, it's good in a way because it's causing us to change some of the unnormal, irregular, unhealthy behaviors that we've adopted and lived with as a society.
Yeah, I forget where this quote came from, but it was early on in the pandemic. It was talking about how the pandemic isn't breaking America's society; it's showing where it was already broken. It's showing it's shining a light on the parts of our seemingly stable structure that were not stable at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're seeing, so much right now, where people are like, this isn't working right now, and it's clearly not working, and it wasn't working before. And a little bit of it is like, a lot of people have the time now. A lot of people have the time to start, being more active and being in confronting these things. Which again, it's a shame that it took a pandemic for us to really sit down and take the time on these topics. But it's one of those things that the better late than never, I'm glad that we're showing up now.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah. So you talked about how people generally come into the diverse dining events like ready to talk, right? And that's because, like, if you sign up for diverse dining, like, you sort of know, like, you're motivated, you want to be a part of this, right? But there have to be some people who do it kind of out of curiosity, but aren't necessarily comfortable. And you welcome those people too. Yes, like how does that work?
Oh, absolutely.
I've seen people who are really all about sharing and talking and listening, and then other people who are a little bit less. So
yeah, absolutely. I think there's both all the time. I mean, and especially when I'm doing trainings with companies. I mean, it's a whole different thing too when you work with a group of people for however long, and you got to have dinner with them, and you didn't necessarily want to, or you sign up and have a dinner training. So I think that there's always people. I mean, and then there are the husbands that get dragged along to the diverse dinings in the community with their wives. As well as people who maybe thought they were signing up for something where they were just going to be able to eat and not a whole conversation. So I think that there always is a mix. I do, like I said before, have activities and icebreakers that I create all the time that kind of like breaks the mold for that. So people aren't, they come in and are able to just work through some of that, early on in the conversation. And then because people typically like to talk about themselves. I mean, we have some introverts that maybe don't, but because the conversation, so much of it is centered around people and their own experiences. I think people get into that because a lot of times, and I'm sure it's going to really be the interest in after this pandemic. But like, I know many people who have stopped asking people how are they doing just during this time, because it's like most people aren't even asking people how they're doing because everybody feels like nobody is doing well right now.
Yes.
You know, like, so I mean, to go to a place where somebody's asking you about your experience, asking you how you feel about something, asking you certain questions about things that you went through that you may not even have processed. I mean, there's so much stuff that people don't even process on their own, you know, with life. And I mean, now we'll have years to unpack in, you know, just the beginning of 2020, you know, with the protests and with the pandemic and with, you know, the grieving of family members that have been lost, and with, I mean, there's so much stuff that is happening at a rapid speed with the financial impact, you know, that people are just at this point, they're like, I just want to make it through tomorrow. I just want to make it through tomorrow. Some people aren't even trying to unpack it. So to have that time where people are asking you how you're doing and really are responsive to it and really are sharing and connecting, I think people enjoy that, even if they came in thinking that they wouldn't or that they didn't want to be involved. And then I also think, you know, sharing, part of the reason, you know, in my book that I share my business, and I'll tell you more about something about that with you in a second, but it's because when other people are vulnerable first, it kind of gives people the invitation to say, oh, or sometimes they may be looking like, oh, my life ain't that bad, I can share my story, or they'll just say, you know, she shared, so I can share too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's a good segue. Let's talk about your book.
Yeah.
Because you just wrote a book and it's available for sale on the Diverse Dining website. And what made you decide? I think you said you were talking about writing a book. And I think the first time I interviewed you is like 2 years ago, right? 2 years ago?
I don't even, so here's the thing, I'll tell you about that. But well, first of all, what I want to say is you probably had a lot to do with me writing this book, and a lot to do with the way that my diverse dining started, because of how nosy you were in my first interview.
It was nosy.
No. So Lori did my very first public interview for diverse dining, and you know, it was so funny because Lisa referred me to you from BizStart, and then, you know, I'm thinking, okay, she just wants to know about my company and why I get started. Lori's like, I feel like there's something else here. I feel like it's more to you, and like, why would you want to start this? And so she's like, we should sit down and talk. And I'm like, you know, sometimes when you get in a conversation, you used to have a conversation, you know, because it was my first interview, I didn't really know what I was being interviewed for, or what was just conversation, because I, you know, talk to people. But Lori was asking all the questions. And so when I remember seeing my first interview, which was very, very helpful, but also even at that time, before I started my organization, I knew I was going to have to be more vulnerable. And vulnerability, you know, I'm very relatable. Like, I feel like it's easy for me to build relationships, to connect with people, but being vulnerable is something I have intentionally, for a long part of my life, stayed away from. Like, I was okay with listening to other people's information and encouraging them and helping them, but I did not want people in my business. I mean, there's a lot of things that I just, you know, a lot of people, even people who I felt like were kind of close to me, just didn't know because I didn't share. But I realized very early on when I started the organization that I would have to allow myself to be vulnerable if I wanted to be, you know, successful, or if I wanted to really see the kind of impact that I wanted to see with my organization. And so when you interviewed me and started asking me all the questions, I really started to think about all the questions that somebody may ask me later on. And I mean, later on, Ted Perry did an interview. He asked a lot of questions. He interviewed my nephew at home. So it was getting more and more personal. I'm like, I better tell this story before somebody else tell it. So I own the rights to my story, at least a piece of it. And that was kind of what led me later on. And in fact, I went through an author lab, which was write a book in 90 days. I actually went to a class that she offered that was like an inner healing class and a like release class. And I didn't even know I was going to write a book. That was not on my 2020 plan. And she was offering like a special for us to be in this cohort to write a book in 90 days. And I just, you know, I believe God was like, sign up and write the book, but it wasn't on my 2020 goal plan. But the book is about rejection. And it's a little, you know, me sharing a lot of different rejection that I experienced in my childhood and, you know, corporate spaces and in church, and just in life, in relationships, because we all experience it, and so many things. I mean, I think that in every instance for me. So the book is called Rejection Uprooted: 5 practical principles to overcoming rejection. What I found is that in all of those opportunities or situations where I was rejected, my values and different principles would always in some way stand up, or I would compromise them so I could delay the rejection, and then I would end up getting rejected later on. And so I pulled out these 5 principles, which are also the core values of my organization, and talked about how I use them to help me to overcome rejection and to keep moving forward in rejection and when rejection presents itself. And so, again, like I said earlier, I think that is the core behind, all of it. I think it's the core behind racism. I think it's the core at, any self-hatred. It's us wanting to be accepted, or us fearing being rejected is really at the core of a lot of good decisions, even, if they end up being good, or poor decisions that we make. And so that's what the book is about. And, I was, even after I wrote it, at first I was like, I'm not going to tell anybody I wrote this book. But it's out there, it's happening. And I think that it's designed to really help people. The other thing that came out of the book shortly after, and even just through this pandemic, in my reflection time, I really began to see, I was struggling a lot because my organization, we meet face to face, and that is what I love. Like, we sit at tables, we eat, and when everything happened and we could not meet face to face and we could not eat, I began to question again and get frustrated with my organization and say, like, well, is this really helping people? Like, look at all this stuff going on. This is nice that we've all ate at tables for the last 2 years and got to know other people, but is it helping? The fact that this pandemic is affecting different races disproportionately, or is it helping, in this protest situation? And I really, started to almost get down on myself, but really start to look at what was going on. And it out of this pandemic, it really birthed another phase of my business, another couple phases of my business, and really made things crystal clear for me. So, I'll just say that starting July 15th, I will be starting a coaching aspect, which is really some of what we've been talking about this whole time: one-on-one, and then small group relationship, identity, and helping people overcome rejection. Because I feel like that is the key component when people want to go from being unaware to being an advocate. Like, you really have to take yourself through that process that I talked about. Your own personal awareness, your own acceptance. You will never, picking on you, Lori, but like, you're a white woman, you will never be a black woman. No. You can't become a black woman. There are some things you can do in your position, but you still have to own who you are. You still have to be okay with who you are. And if you feel like you have to feel guilty about who you are, you have to, disassociate with who you are in order to be effective, then you're never going to be effective, in my opinion. And so it is really a framework that's designed to help walk people who have got past exploring. They understand a little bit about the fact that things need to change, but they're really decided to make the change start with them, so that they can see some changes in those personal relationships, like we talked about, on their jobs. And then if later on they want to be an advocate, or they want to be a diverse dining, leader or trainer, or whatever, then they have the opportunity. But I think, and this could open up a whole nother conversation, like, I think I would rather a person be ignorant than to think that they're knowledgeable and try to teach other people. And so that this phase is really important to me, and I really feel like it's the missing piece to what I've been doing, and so necessary. So the book birthed all of that, and so did the pandemic, and I'm really, really excited about having an extended version of my organization, because I really know that that's where the transformation is going to start for a lot of people.
Yeah. I know there's been a lot of writing and work and research, like, over the past few years, that leadership, good leadership, strong leadership, is really, really based in vulnerability. And there are 20,000 leadership books out there that don't ever talk about that, and more recently, I think a few have come out that have. But I think that we're hitting on something really strongly here, that if you can't be vulnerable and admit to yourself who you are and own your own stuff, you can't do a lot, to help other people, to lead other people. You can't even be a good follower, quite frankly, right? So all of this sort of really, really ties into that. And so what can people, if someone picks up your book, they will obviously read about your experiences, but what are they going to take out of it themselves? Like, what do you want them to come away with?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, is going to be, they'll be able to, one, have principles and identify principles that or values that they live by. I think that at the end of the day, and like I said before when talking about my sister, they're who I am is still who I am, but I understand what is important to me and what is not. So I'm not going to, I'm strong, and this has been able to carry me and strengthen me through organizations. Knowing when I need to leave an organization or knowing when I need to leave a relationship, is that I have values and I have principles that are mine. And a principle to me, principle and character, we could go to a whole other conversation, but that's principle and character are colorblind. I don't dislike Trump because he's white. I dislike, or don't dislike certain things because they're look a certain way. It's your character. What is the character that what is at your core? And so the book, I think, will help people be able to identify their own, what is really important to them. But I also think that the principles that I talk about, the awareness, self-awareness is to me, it's the start of so many other things. They'll be able to really think about what are some of the fears that they have, what are some of the issues that they have, what are some of the boundaries that they put up or what are some of the ways that they have changed who they are to conform to some aspects of society that wasn't really who they are. So I go through the 5 principles: awareness, acceptance, accountability, authenticity, and action. And then there is questions at the end of the book, at the end of each chapter, so that they can process those different things. But I think that it's going to help them to, 1, stand up in the face of rejection, to 2, be able to really understand what their core values and their principles are. And then I think 3, to just be able to move past certain areas of stagnation. I think we get, when we don't know, we get stuck and we just stop. And I think no movement is not good. So if we're making some kind of forward progress, even if it's a small step, somebody may think you should be doing, whatever else. But if you're moving forward in some direction, that's good. And so that's the other major thing, is to help people move past their places of stagnation in whatever areas that they're in.
Yeah. So you said that starting in July, you're going to start with coaching. And I think there's a question, how can people register? Will it be on the Diverse Dining website?
Yep, it will. And I think I might be able to, I might have a link. I'll have to look and see. But yes, what they can do is go to the fordiversedining.com. And at the bottom, there's a contact form. If they fill out the contact form, I'm only taking 10 slots. I actually have a small group of women right now, 13, that I'm coaching, that I'm coaching and leading a small group with. Just unofficially, it's with some ladies from my church that I belong to. But I will start taking official coaching clients on July 15th, and I'll only take 10. It will be 5 weeks of individual one-on-one coaching, and then the last 5 weeks they'll be in a small group of 5 other people, just to kind of continue to walk out a part of that process. But I really, I found out, number one, that I have a whole cluster of friends, and I have a whole couple cluster of people that I thought was my friends, but I really found out I'm really coaching them. And I mean, it's okay, but I really know that this is just something that I do in my life, and it's something that I'm supposed to do, particularly, again, around identity. I can't tell you how many inbox messages I've gotten from people who felt guilty, or who felt like, what else is there? What else is it that I'm supposed to do? Or I feel bad because I'm not doing X, Y, Z. And I have to tell people, you can't do, if you're doing something from a place of guilt, or you're doing something from a place of, you self-sacrifice, then it's probably not going to, end up being the result that you want it to be. You have to be able to, stand flat-footed and deal with whatever the things are that are, the fears that are coming up for you or the challenges that are coming up for you personally. Otherwise, you won't probably end up being a leader that people respect or being a leader that is really, really effective in doing whatever it is you're trying to do. So I know the process is necessary.
Yeah. No, that's great. And, this is one of those scenarios where, and I've heard it said over and over again right now, like, don't go to your Black friends are going through a lot right now. Do not go to them and expect them to solve like your white identity problems and help you come to terms with all the things that you need to learn. That's on you, and you need to talk to other people. And this is a scenario though where and I think you talked to me, we talked the other day or a week or two ago, and you were just saying like, but this is naturally what you do. So you're offering this up, but people also, this is a service,
Right. And I think that's the important note, and I'm sure maybe there are some people who are doing a similar thing, but that is an important note. Like, right, when I struggle with, if I need therapy, I don't go talk to my friend and expect her to be my therapist. I'm going to go find a therapist. And so I think, I do think that I hear the other side too, because like I said, I have a lot of diverse friends where I hear white people say, well, I don't want to learn about Black people from somebody who's not Black, or I don't want to ask somebody else about, a Black culture than the Black culture. So that's why I ask my Black friends a lot of questions. Well, everybody didn't sign up for that. And so you do need to make sure that you find somebody who is willing to talk to you or who is willing to walk with you through some different things. But I also think that it's so important to not just jump from, oh my God, there's a problem, to now I want to go solve the problem. Because, there is a process by which you have to go through. And even for me, like I had to really go deep in my friendship and develop, friendships and navigate some of the challenges that I had personally before I could go, before I had even other friends of different cultures and before I could feel comfortable having conversations that weren't offensive to other people. And so there is a process by which you have to go through personally. And so I hear, that is what this is designed to do. And yes, I am a coach, and yes, I will. It is a service, and I will be getting paid for it because it is work. It's work on my part and it's work on other person's part. And so, but it's important work, and I think it's important to find people who are willing to do it and not just assign random people to be your therapist or whatever else it is that you feel like you need.
Right. Well, and I'm hearing you hit on something else that I found is kind of important. I think, I think there's a lot of people out there right now, and maybe a little even in myself, where it's like, okay, we want to jump ahead. Like let's do all of these things and pick, and you have to stop and think like, okay, where am I at? Like, how healthy is my brain right now? Have I needed to do all the things that I need to do before I can do that? Like you can't walk before you're ready, like before you're, and more importantly than that is like, it's not just something where you learn it all and you're done.
Right.
Like this is like every day you do something new, and every day you do something, and like, I don't know. And I think, humanity, just being human and living life is like that. But I think too many people don't even stop to think. They think like, oh, I'm grown. Like I'm an adult. Like I know stuff. But it's a journey. Like,
I'm sorry, my Alexa alarm went off, so I had to tell Alexa to stop. Very much things happening here. Yeah. I really agree. And again, because I think it's relationship, it's relationship with yourself, it's relationship with other people. Like you don't have any good relationships with anybody if you don't have a good relationship with yourself. And I think that, we could go into a whole nother conversation, but racism in America has caused an identity crisis, not just for African American people, but for white people as well. And so there's a sense of identity identity crisis, for lack of better words, that I think everybody is going through right now. And, what I think is finally agreed upon is that something is wrong, but where people fit and how they feel and where they're torn is different for both sides, or for all sides really, because most people have experienced some level of that. But I think that it's important to understand one that relationship is what we're after. We don't want to get to the point where we try to learn Black people so we can categorize, all of them in one category, and then we're the expert on how to deal with Black people, just like we don't, with white people. Like it's relationship. It's the same thing you may be going through, how you navigating living with your husband during a quarantine. You know what I mean? Like it's some days it's good and some days it's bad, and some days you love the person, next day they crap, because it's a relationship. And so I think that because relationships have been formed for whatever reason across culture is to the level that they should be, that people just, people want to have the dosage or the antidote on how does this look and how does this act, and now I got it and I got it figured out. But again, that goes back to putting people in boxes, and it really goes also back to like, this is about relationship. And so first I got to check how my relationship is with myself and what issues I have around, connecting with people of whatever background. And then I can deal with, what's going on with them. Where are they at? And how do we, build a common understanding and work through the different challenges that will come up. I say this all the time. If you have relationships around you, whether they're family or friends or strangers, and there's no conflict and there's never a conflict, I would question the validity of the relationship. It is not realistic. Either they are just like scared of you, or they really, like they don't like you. But if there's no conflict, it's something going on with that. And so for us to for us to deal with all of the things that we've been dealing with this country for all of this time, and to think that we're going to encounter people that have been on whatever side of that and not have conflicts and not be uncomfortable and not be challenged is the most, bizarre thing I can think of. It's not realistic.
If it was that easy, it would have happened a long time ago. You would like to think.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to. Someone I believe asked this down in the below area, but where can people find Diverse Dining? Where can people register? Where can people find you?
Okay. So I'm on Facebook for Diverse Dining. I see it on the comments. ForDiverseDining.com is the website. If you use the contact form at the bottom, and just fill out a contact form and put a note, interested in coaching or interested in, whatever, learning more, then we'll get more information to you right away. I'm also on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. Any of those ways you can get in contact. Once the world opens up a little bit more, you'll be seeing a lot more of us, especially now. But right now, any of those ways, someone will get in contact with you.
Yes. And the website also has access. If you click on shop, you can also find Emerald's book, which you can buy and read. And that's maybe a good place to start, right? Like if you want to start somewhere.
I agree. Very good.
So,
yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. I don't have my.
Yes, it is there. And I have to leave my tips now, since one of the ladies said it. The tips about building better relationships during this time. And one of the things we talked about were being honest, which goes back to that self-awareness. I think sometimes people think they're being honest, but they're not in tune enough with themselves that they don't even realize that they're lying or not being completely honest, about where they are. And so being honest and being self-aware. And then I put, being open. And I think that's being open and also understanding that conflict isn't always negative. Like just knowing that sometimes you'll be challenged or maybe uncomfortable or maybe silent, but it's okay. So being open to understanding that things may not be, there may not be a particular format or predictability to how that thing is going to go. And then I also put get support and be accountable. I talked to my coach, but it's obviously, only going to be 10 slots for July. So a lot of people may not get that support this month coming up. But to find someone. And just because if you're trying to work on having a better relationship with another culture, maybe you can start with really having a better conversation with people who you do have a relationship with of the same culture, and saying, what are some of the things about me that are annoying? Or what are some of the things about me that you feel like, make you not want to talk? You feel like I interrupt a lot, or Do you feel like I'm a good listener? Like you can talk to people who you already have in your network to figure out maybe some of the things that you are doing that are offensive. I mean, even probably your own spouse will be like, listen, if if you talk a little less, people may not be as challenged or whatever. So I think, having some level of accountability and also I think really this is the last thing I want to say, because this is not the last thing, but this is one thing I really want to say, is I think that we have to take away, and this is one of the things that used to drive me crazy when I worked in corporate America, and I know people have said this before, but the help, we want to help people, and I think that's nice, but we gotta make sure we want to help ourselves, and also when we are dealing with relationship, we gotta just understand that, like, I just want to be better, and I just want to connect. Like, I don't. There are some people who need help, and I think are asking for it, but a lot of people are just like, I don't. I would rather you not help me, but you just respect me, you just see me, you just hear me, then you come and provide bake sale items, or you come in to do, volunteer in my neighborhood, or whatever the case may be. And so I think, really just taking off that idea of, because I think sometimes there's a lesserness, there's a superiority, I guess is the best way to help somebody.
Yes,
yeah, savior complex, but you're still just like, I can help you, or I can help, and it's really getting rid of that and just saying, like, let me help myself and see, what's going on with me, and how how I could be causing some harm here. Mm-hmm. So I think that's just important to think about too. And again, the help is important, and people appreciate it. I'm not saying don't do just causes that don't support people who are asking for support, but to really take off that mindset of you having to be the one to save people, or you having to be the one to help people. Sometimes it's not even about that at all.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. As it was interesting being at some of the protests, and you would see people kind of who weren't leading the group or anything, but they would try to start protests. And there was one part where Frank Nitti was trying to talk, and people just started chants down. It was just like, now is not the time for you. Like, be okay being a participant and listening.
That's good. That's good. That's another whole nother nugget by itself, Matt. It's just like, sometimes it's okay to listen. Sometimes it's okay to not know, or to not have an answer or response. Sometimes it's okay to be the one that's sitting in the chair, being learning. And so I think that is just, and it's a method I always try to take with me when I did a lot of work in the community, over the years. It's like, I'm not showing up to somebody's neighborhood like I already have the answers. I don't know what is going on. I don't know what is happening. I don't know what is causing you to make the decisions that you are making right now. And so I need to first become a student before I can become a teacher. And that is one of the things that raises sometimes hairs in the back of my neck, especially because of the work and the space that I'm in, when I just see people, of whatever backgrounds, but just that are just, you just cannot tell them. They got the answer figured out. They ain't never met the people. They ain't never been to the neighborhood, but they can tell you more about people's lives than the people themselves. And that's something we got to stop.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I think we're going to have you back. I think this is going to be first part of many of these FoodCrush conversations. Yeah. But this has been terrific. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Facebook Live.
I'm glad.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say I'm glad to be here, and I was going to say too, like, Lori is like my food crush, because, like I said, she pulled me out of my comfort zone very early on, and was like, tell me more, and got all of my information, which I know, helped to kickstart a lot of people, because they trust her and know her in the community. And when she said, come to Diverse Dining, a lot of people came. And so it helped to give my organization a really good start. So I'm very thankful and appreciative of that, and thankful to be back around full circle. This is going on 2 years, the 28th of June. And so I'm very grateful to be here and would love to come back. So
yeah, congratulations on 2 years. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well, and thank you, because meeting you and in little ways for the last 2 years has made me into a better person. We always have good conversations. So thank you. And thank you for what you're doing, for the community. I love the fact that you can do good and still make a living. I think that's the goal for a lot of us, is like, how can we put our passion into something that we can actually make a living doing? And you have definitely done that. So
still working on it. So sign up for them 10 coaching slots.
Yes. Help her to do that.
You heard Lori's testimony to say I've helped her be a better person, and that she wasn't even a coaching client. So imagine what can happen for you.
It's true. It's true. All right. Thank you. And again, I'm going to echo what Matt said. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to technology for allowing this to happen. Yay. And I agree. Like there are lots of conversations that I think you could that we could have to enlighten people, while still, allowing you to do your thing. So thank you.
Okay. I look forward to the call. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thank you.